Welcome, everybody, to Paul's Treehouse. My name is Paul Siegel, and I'm here today with a tremendous, well, not here, but virtually through Skype, with a tremendous artist, Justin Martin, who is the founder and creator of PoseMuse. If you followed him earlier, you may be familiar with PoseReference, a pretty popular Tumblr site where he posts these beautiful renditions of the human figure. And he's a really multidisciplinary artist, as you're about to find out, and I would like to talk to him today about his history, kind of his upbringing, what led him into the arts and the realm of tattooing. And we're going to be featuring some of those works here as we talk about it. And I'm just really excited to talk with Justin and find out what he's up to. I know that he's published 4 books and is working on his 5th book right now. He's come out with volumes featuring sitting poses, standing poses, books featuring couples interacting with each other, and now he's come up with a 5th volume featuring skulls, hands, and pinups. Did I get that right, Justin?
Yeah. It's a nice way of saying it's a various book.
Various. Excellent. Cool. Well, before we get into that, because I do want you to talk about that and tell everybody what you're doing there. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your upbringing. When we spoke last night, you had mentioned how your mom had kind of an influence on you getting into the arts. Maybe you can start there.
My mom was always super supportive. She was one of the first people to stick a pencil in my hand. So she was also a pretty talented woman. And yeah, she never dissuaded me from drawing, and what I wanted to draw. So my mother, when I was very young, sat me down with a piece of paper and a pencil, and I think my first memory is I'm about 2 years old. And I remember sitting, at the dining room table with a pencil in my hand, and my mom had made a little card in front of me with my name on it. And she was teaching me how to write my name, which is, again, it's my first memory. There's this real homey feeling I get when I get drawing.
Yeah.
And it's a real comforting feeling, and it's followed me my whole life. It's how I've learned. It's how I cope through school as a child, and we traveled a bunch when I was young. We moved constantly, and I guess we were poor. I mean, we were poor, so we went where the work was. And changing schools all the time. Just the art was the one consistent thing I had. I have a very clear memory of being in like the 4th grade and not really having any friends and not having developed that part of my personality yet, where I was forced to either start making friends or just sort of shrink back more and more. And I remember in school, just having that piece of paper and drawing characters and drawing little wars and drawing, just drawing all the time, doodling constantly, just to keep my mind off of the situation. Like I didn't want to deal with the social interactions with other people, so I drew to avoid it. Which is really odd, because it really is how I feel like I wound up making the most friends as I got older. In high school, it always opened up doors for me. It was like a superpower. And so as it developed from this, me hunching over and drawing these really like personal little worlds, to me opening up to other people and sharing that and seeing how they responded to it so positively. And then that was a self-reinforcing behavior, and it made me so happy. In my isolation, as I got into high school, my isolation kind of went away because people were drawn to that. So even though I was an art nerd, I was still really, it was really easy to make friends all of a sudden because I could draw. It was, it was crazy. And I guess that's probably why I do what I do today, because people still are really drawn to it. And that makes me happy. I don't know.
Sure. You had mentioned that you didn't really go into a formal art school, but you had a tremendous education through an amazing mentorship you had with one of the Mad Magazine artists. His name was Sergio. You had mentioned.
Yep, Sergio Aragones.
Mm-hmm.
I after high school, I moved to Southern California. A friend of mine let me crash on his couch, and I was working in this little town in Southern California, and I kept drawing. And at some point, I think I was in a copy shop with my sketchbooks, and I was making a bunch of copies of my art for. I was actually thinking about this last night. So what I was doing, I had drawn a bunch of character art, like superheroes and stuff like that. And I was going to make packets of just the drawings of my characters. And there was a comic shop that would let me put just like a stapled packet of 8.5 by 11 sheets in with the comic books on a shelf and sell it for $2 or something like that. So I was making copies of the copy shop, and the copy shop owner saw what I was doing and was like, "Oh, well, you need to. There's a comic book artist in town, and you need to meet him." And I was like, "Okay, cool. That's great. I'd love to meet a real comic book artist." And but low expectation, Justin. I was just like, "Okay, well, this will happen. When hell freezes over, so I'm not going to hold my breath." And I wound up. I think I wound up giving them my phone number, and then I got a phone call from this guy, and he was like, "Hey, I got your phone number from." The people at the copy shop, and my studio is on this street, and if you come by at like 9 o'clock, I'll be there. And I'm like, okay, 9 o'clock p.m. And I was just like, okay, A, I don't know who this guy is, and B, it's nighttime, and and I'm a 19-year-old kid, and I was like, this is creepy. So but again, I'm so drawn to art, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess he's famous, so I'll just go say hi. And so yeah, anyway, he wound up being just the friendliest guy in the world, and that's just he opened up his studio to a complete stranger. And so I walk into his studio, and I am blown away because the studio is an absolute clutter of piles of artwork, awards on the walls, artwork that would blow your mind. Like there was original Gil Kane drawings of Batman. There were sketches by Boris Vallejo. These are these beautiful original pieces. And I'm walking in and I'm like, who the hell are you? Like, I didn't know his name. I've been reading Mad Magazine my whole life. And in Mad Magazine, there's these little cartoons in the margins. They're called marginals. And they're pantomime. There's no words to them. And they're like little snapshots that are the setup and the punchline all together. And it's a pantomime. It's an instant laugh every time I would see these things. And I would buy Mad Magazines just to get these things. Well, Sergio Aragones had been drawing these for Mad Magazine since the 60s. And he's considered one of the greats, in comic book artists, the greatest comic book artist in the world. I mean, he's he writes sketches for other comics. He's the guy who did Gru, and he did a series called Magnor. He's revered, and I met him on a fluke. So super generous guy. So anyway,
Wow.
I'm there for the first time, and I've got my sketchbooks or whatever, and he took an interest in the art. He took an interest in me. I don't know if he took an interest in the art because the art was garbage, but over 4 years, I hung out in the studio. I fetched coffee. I ran errands for him, and he was kind enough to eviscerate my art at every opportunity and tell me what I was doing wrong and give me some like honest to God feedback. Like, as a young artists with their friends get a lot of positive reinforcement, but they don't get any criticism. And so it's really hard to grow if you think what you're doing is perfect all the time. And so getting some honest feedback from somebody who is not just talented but wise was beyond helpful. Like it transformed the way I interact with other artists forever. I mean, his tutelage was laser focused. Like there were was a time when he noticed I wasn't drawing hands. I was only drawing fists or whatever, and I would hide hands. I mean, that's a common artist thing when drawing people, because drawing hands is a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Do you not know how to draw hands?" And I was like, "Well, no, I'm kind of, but no." And he was like, "Oh, okay. Well, go and buy a 100-page sketchbook. Tomorrow, go and buy a 100-page sketchbook, and I want you to draw hands on the front and back of every page, and don't come back until it's done." And at that point, I was like, "Oh, well, that's not possible. I mean, it's going to take me a year to do this." So over like a month or so, I cranked out this book of hundreds of hand poses of just hand drawings. And I came back. It was like, I don't know, a month or two later, and I showed up, and he was happy to see me, and he was like, "Did you do it?" And I handed him, I had it in my hand, the sketchbook, and I said, "Here it is. It's full of hands." And he was like, "And you drew on both sides of each page?" And I said, "Yes." And he was, and so I handed it to him, and he's like, "And you drew on both sides of each page?" "Yes." And he didn't even open it up. He just handed it back to me and said, "Good. And now we can move on." And he never looked at it. I think I threw the sketchbook away as I walked out of his studio.
Oh no, really?
It might be. I think it was the only sketchbook I've ever thrown away. I have most of my sketchbooks, since I was a little kid. I still have them lying around, and I think that's one of the few. It's my best story, and it's one sketchbook I don't have. And so,
Wow.
but that's the kind of guy he was. He took a real. I mean, oh my God, he was incredible. But it was it was an old school mentorship. Like he was just there to make sure that, I stayed on a track.
Did you find it difficult to deal with that kind of laser focused criticism for the first time? Maybe you knowing who he was as an artist, did it perhaps help? Because I remember when I first met someone who mentored me, looked through my portfolio, kind of flipping it like this, flip, 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 flip. And then he closed and he said, "All this stuff is garbage. Come back with some new stuff." And it was stuff that, it was work that I had produced like over my entire high school time period. And the stuff I was really proud of. And it really, really hurt, to get that kind of critique. It really reminds me of your story. And I almost felt like, well, this is pointless. What the hell am I doing, with my life? But there was this little voice in my head that said, wait a minute, if he is really giving me that kind of critique, then it means he thinks I can do better, And then all of a sudden it became like a compliment in a way. That's kind of how I framed it in my mind. I went back to the drawing board, and after that point, I just couldn't stay away from this guy. I just had to I had to figure out how can I do something that he actually likes.
Yeah, that abused person relationship. It's the Helsinki syndrome. Well, okay, so there's actually how the story really goes. I sugarcoat the first part of it. So the very first time I showed up there, I showed him my sketchbook, and he's flipping through. It wasn't even a sketchbook; it was a collection of. It was my portfolio. It was just a big stack of drawings, and he's flipping through it, and he's going, "Oh, really nice. Yes, nice.
Oh.
just the opposite of what you did. Oh, this is really nice. This is great. Good." And he was like, "Okay, well, come back when you have new stuff." And so I left, and I was like, "Wow, he loved my shit. I'm going to go and draw like crazy." So I drew like crazy, and I showed up the next night. With like 5 or 6 new drawings, and he was flipping through them. "Oh, these are nice. These are nice. These are nice." And I came back, I don't know, maybe a week later, and then I came back 2 or 3 days in a row. So in a very short period of time, I was probably there, let's say 20 days out of 30.
Wow.
And there was, and he always was just like, "Oh, this is really good. This is really good." And then at some point, I showed up, and he looked at me, and he was like, "You're going to keep coming back, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Okay, you're going to keep coming back. I'm going to tell you the truth." I mean, he literally like flipped a switch and was like, since you are actually going to keep coming back, because he was just placating me to get the fanboy out of his studio. He had work to do. So it went from like these 3-minute sessions to, he would look at the stuff and say, "Oh, great," and then he would sort of just go back to what he was doing and sort of like shush me out the door. And at some point I was like, I figured it out. It was like, maybe a week into this like little game he was doing, I was like, he's just saying this to get me out the door. He's not giving me any thought at all, and it made me mad. And so I went back and I was like, would you just tear into it? Like, Sergio, I'm not quitting. Like you said, I could come back anytime. Until I move, I'm gonna come here. And he was like, "You're really gonna be back? You're really gonna?" I'm like, "Yeah." And what had happened was, and what I think happened was he had so many kids come through and show him their art, but they never did anything with it. That he wasn't gonna waste his time. He wasn't gonna give it any effort because I mean, so many kids are you draw in high school, but then you don't do anything with it. And I think at some point he realized I wasn't going to stop coming. And he was like, okay, well, we'll try the opposite thing. And that's when he really started, like you said, he just eviscerated it. He was like, what's this behind this character? And I'm like, it's clouds. He's like, those are shit clouds. You need to learn how to draw clouds. And he'd take me out to the porch and he'd point at the clouds. See how those clouds are? They're puffy and they're round. And I'm like, holy, he gave me a whole new way to look at things. Yeah. And it wasn't until he, like you said, he started really giving me like true criticism. And it was like, okay, now I have a goal to shoot for. I probably knew that it meant that he was like, okay, this kid is he's got something. I don't know if that was the truth.
Man. Wow. So how many years were you kind of studying with him, having him mentor you?
I was bugging him at least once a month and more like once a week or twice a week for the better part of 4 years.
4 years, wow. So after this, you were saying you were thinking about getting into comic books, and so he was obviously an idol of yours. Why didn't it go in that direction? How did you get into tattooing from there?
I was no good at sequential art. Okay. Drawing the same thing from multiple angles and just continually drawing the same, the same character over and over and over again. It holds no interest for me. Like I mean, I can probably do it and get away with it, but there would be no passion in it. And I was really like concepting character art, drawing my friends' D&D characters, drawing my own superheroes, drawing like Robotech and robots and cyborgs. That was my thing. And so at that point I was like, I want to do pin-up-y concept stuff, but I don't want to be a Frazetta or a Boris and just take it all the way to oil paint. It's like I wanted to create books of just cool art. And it hadn't happened yet. It's happened now. You can find books all over the place with that stuff in it. And but it hadn't materialized then. And so the step from that to tattooing was a couple of careers. Hospitality. I just got the best jobs I could find, and for a while I worked in hotels. I worked my way up to middle management in hotels. While I was doing that, I was teaching myself some coding stuff, and then I worked my way up from a entry-level web developer to a senior level content engineer as a in the computer industry. But that whole time I actually drew my own comic in 1997, 1998 and published it myself. This is before on-demand printing. Like I had to create all the files and get everything scanned and functioning. Even the scanner was thousands of dollars. So thank God the company had one. And so I did publish a comic, and it was awful. And it was in 1998. I actually went to Comic-Con with it. And Sergio made sure that Comic-Con gave me a table directly next to his. So his line went by my table, which was incredible. I mean, he's just so generous. Yeah. That whole time, I had been the coolest art that I would find out there. The internet wasn't the internet yet. All the cool art and stuff that's up there was none of it, And so and the books were few and far between. So the coolest art I saw on the reg was tattoo magazines. This is probably like the late 90s. At some point, the internet gave us Yahoo. What was it called? The chat boards. What was it called? Yahoo. And no, not Yahoo Answers. But anyway, there was a threaded discussion part of Yahoo, and there was a couple of forums. There was a couple of forums, and
I remember those. I remember those forums.
Yeah, man, it was everything. It was a great place to find people who would post their own artwork and stuff.
Nice.
At that point, I got on the forums, and man, I looked at the tattoo magazines. I realized that if I got the right catalog, I could get the right equipment, but I never even seen it work. So I didn't fool myself to think I could just buy the stuff and hurt people. And I started asking on those boards, how do I become a tattoo artist? And they were super candid. They were like, look, you need to go to a shop with your art, tell them have them look your art over, and tell them you want to apprentice. And I'm like, ooh, apprentice? Like, and they're like, yeah, it's unpaid internship, because I'm from the tech industry. I know what an unpaid intern is. And I took my comic art portfolio to a tattoo shop. I called them up and said, hey, can I come show you my portfolio? And they're like, sure, come on down. Because artists want to see other people's art. And I showed them the art portfolio, and they were like, holy crap, man, you show me how to draw like this, and I'll show you how to tattoo. And that's just sort of how my apprenticeship occurred.
Nice.
And yeah, so nobody had to teach me how to draw. I knew how to draw. I knew how to line. I knew how to shade. I knew how to do all the pieces, all the art part of tattooing. I just didn't know how to make the machine behave. And so it took about a year for me to figure out, to get a real, to get my legs under me in tattooing. And it was off to the races. That was 1999. It's been 20 years. I've been a full-time artist the whole time. And it's been quite a ride,
Yeah.
And I love the medium. The medium is amazing. And unlike other forms of art, where if you're a comic book artist or any other kind of real artist, you're creating in isolation. And as a tattoo artist, I create with my audience present.
Yeah.
Every piece of art I do, the person who's getting that art is sitting right there, and it's a rush.
Oh, it's got to be really special, Clearly, I can tell from your drawings of the human figure that you love people, that you love the human form. And one of the things that I noticed when I was looking at your work with tattooing, and I'm assuming this is deliberate or perhaps subconscious, but you really leverage the three-dimensional form of the body for the tattoo that you're working on. Like I noticed there's this one of a woman's face that you tattooed on the shoulder, and the shape of the shoulder really gives that form three-dimensionality. You know what I mean? It's really cool how you've really married your love of the human figure with the application of the tattooing. I find that's really unique.
Using the shape of the canvas, you're talking about a human body, but using the shape of the canvas to help create an illusion one way or another with the artwork is absolutely intentional. It's one of the great tricks of tattooing.
What were some surprises, things you didn't anticipate going into the tattoo world?
I probably didn't expect it to be so precise. You would think that because the canvas is moving and breathing and sweating and bleeding and doing, and you're getting all that on your hands and you're wiping and cleaning and you're constantly, the needle allows for pixel precise placement if you're willing to mentally and visually zoom into a really small spot and create some really high resolution in your mind, and then like through force of will, make it happen on skin. I mean, you can phone it in and just get some, adequate tattoos, or you can zoom in a little bit and slow down a little bit and really get some super precise art where I don't think anything compares. Like, I mean, drawing on a piece of paper, how many times have you drawn on a piece of paper and it's almost like the paper pulled the pencil in the wrong direction or something, because it's just so smooth and perfect. And here you are stretching skin out, and that machine is drumming on the skin, and just by feeling where the drumming is, you can tell exactly where the needle is hitting. You could almost close your eyes and know what was happening by touch. It's really I mean, I don't think about it a lot, but I mean, it really is quite an intense thing, experience. So many young artists think that being an artist means being creative, and just with no boundaries. And when just the opposite is the truth. Like, having boundaries, in my opinion, makes me have to be more creative. And so with every piece of, like, I do thousands of pieces of art a year if you count tattoos, and every single one of those have restrictions placed upon them. Like, every single client is an art director, and they're very specific most of the time in what they expect, and demanding. And I think that I mean, that, talk about whipping you into shape. Like, you asked something about Sergio. Was like, how did you deal with the criticism? And I've always been a believer that the only way to sharpen a blade is to grind it. Like, I mean, if you're not connecting with something and you feel like there's pressure there and there's almost damage occurring, how are you going to get sharp unless you're ground? I mean, that's what is it? Nose to the grindstone. I love being challenged, and I love being put in a box, and I love being forced to do it their way, because it makes me be the most creative I can.
I think your analogy of sharpening a blade is a really, really good one, and I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people. So
that's where the poses came from as well. I mean, just to touch on that real quick.
Okay, yeah. Well, let's go into that for sure.
The poses for me were a self-imposed trial, where I was like, I don't draw people well enough for my own. Like, I didn't feel good about. I'm fascinated by the human body. To me, it's the most beautiful thing in the world, and I wanted to capture it as best I could. And I knew that I wasn't up to snuff. And at some point, I was like, you know what? I'm going to draw thousands of practice pieces, and I'm going to, because I don't have very good memory, so I'm going to carve this into my memory in a way that I can't ever forget it. And the only way I knew how to do that was just practice, like unending practice. And so it was hard, it was discouraging, it was painful. and within I don't know, 3 months, within 90 days of starting that blog and posting those, because not only was I drawing these pieces, I was posting them publicly, every single one, and going, here you go. Give me a critique or use them or do whatever you want with them. I didn't know what I was doing with them. I was just posting them because I figured if I didn't share them, then they didn't exist. And there was no way for me to get anybody to hold me accountable. Like, if I didn't post a picture up there for 2 or 3 days, people would get on me, and right away. I mean, I had 100 followers, and if I didn't post for a day or two, I'd get messages right away. Are you going to keep posting, or are we done? I was like, okay, hold on, I'll keep posting. And yeah, man, that was not easy. But in the end, like now, I mean, if you compare the first month's images to my last month's images, poses, holy cow. Like, there are times when I'm drawing now where I'm so impressed with myself. It's the first time in my life I'm like, wow, I'm really good at this part. Okay.
But no, it's really true. I mean, every time it's tremendous. Even in the last few years that I've been following your work, there's been this huge evolution. I was looking at your website just now before this interview and saw this beautiful female with her back arched. It's just amazing, the three-dimensionality and the grace that you're getting in your line work right now, and the mileage is really showing through in your work. You should be really proud.
And that shows you what can be done if you do it enough. Like those the how can I say this? The style of the poses developed organically. And so the contour lines and things to show volume happened just by them, not by themselves, but just by that little incremental changes to make it look better and better and better in my mind. It's not me. Like that I'm the conduit for those drawings now. I'm a slave to them. and I'm okay with that, because I'm very how can what's the word I'm looking for? I'm as interested to see the next pose as the fans are.
Interesting.
My whole purpose with this, and you've seen it before, and we've talked about this, is that I'm now creating these things so young artists can just sort of jumpstart their own art, and it makes me happy knowing that art is being made quicker, or starting quicker anyway, because the poses are out there,
So speak a little bit about that. When you publish these poses, are you essentially releasing the rights to the pose so that people can do whatever they want with it? What's kind of your goal?
Yeah. So I believe in this thing called radical sharing. And to me, that means as soon as I post a pose on Tumblr, on the Tumblr blog, it then belongs to the world. And the only right that I reserve at that point is you can't resell my original pose. So you can't just grab my image and stick it in your own book and sell that book.
Right.
If you use my image to draw another image, and I don't care if you trace it, that's your art. That has nothing to do with me. You do what you want with it. There's so many young artists out there. Well, I mean, artists don't make any money, right? Isn't that the old saying? And so the artists on Tumblr were really surprised when I was like, guys, are you doing commissions? Are they difficult? Take one of my poses, trace the damn thing, and get the commission done. Earn your dollar. So, the royalty rights to them are basically wide open, except for paid redistribution. Like I let anybody repost it. I let anybody trace it. I let anybody use it without attribution. I don't want anybody feeling that they are beholden to me or have to give me some kind of credit. It makes me angry when other reference people call young artists out for using their reference. It drives me a little nuts. And I've had it happen, and I've given several people on DeviantArt tongue lashings over them saying things like, "Dear Mr. Martin, there's this young artist who did this piece of art, and the pose looks similar to a photo I took of myself, and I didn't give them permission, or they said they used a drawing of yours to inspire them. Did you use my pose to create your drawing? I didn't give you permission to do that." Well, what a lot of people don't understand is that every single pose I've drawn is one of two things. The first thing is it's paid photo reference that I purchased with a commercial license, which means I can do whatever I want with it. And so what this person on DeviantArt came to me at and saying, "Oh, I own this pose." Well, excuse me very much. I can prove I purchased the pose from another person, and you don't own the pose. Like, nobody owns a pose. That's bull. And as a matter of fact, you acting like this is gonna keep young artists from doing art, and shame on you for doing that. And I was
so
like,
this was the actual model that was photographed in the image that you purchased that reached out to you?
Nope. Oh. It was some other guy who who did the same pose as, not even the same pose, a similar pose to one that I had purchased. Because how many poses are there?
Sure.
And
Well,
so,
yeah.
and so, well, there are millions. But
Yeah.
if you're doing a pose, anyway. No, it was a different. If it was a different reference photography guy. Now, if
Huh.
I had gone on DeviantArt and used his photo reference, I would have followed whatever license, whatever agreement, copyright he has, which I did
Yeah.
not do. I purposely only use photos that I have full royalty to, or full
Right.
license to use, and so I put him in his place, and I'm like, but it gave me an opportunity to go, dude, by not sharing what you're doing, and by calling these young artists out, you're doing damage to them, and don't do that. And it causes me to write blogs and things where I'm angrily denounce anybody who gives a young artist crap for any reason. The other thing I do for my poses is I used to use action figures, and I own every action figure in the world, which is how we met. I found I saw your stuff on Kickstarter. I got super interested in it. I missed your first Kickstarter. Actually, I think I missed your first couple of Kickstarters, but your art mannequin is the greatest thing I had ever seen. And so the other kind of poses I do is I take, I use the cool mannequins, like, I use the Rangers, and I get a photo of it. So it's nice and flat and I can see it in my mind's eye. And then I get it into my drawing application and I use it as a reference layer. And so and nobody can give me crap over that. So anyway,
sure.
my drawings then go out to the public, and I'm like, as long as you're making new art, you can use it any old way you like. I let people use them in collages and all kinds of stuff. Use them in backgrounds and their video transitions, and
Right.
they're, so
There is a lot of stigma in the art industry about reference and about tracing. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that and what your philosophy is, and also maybe touch on how is it that you can use this approach with art but still produce very three-dimensional drawings. Because one of the things I've noticed is that when artists rely too heavily on tracing over a photo, it ends up looking really flat. But something I've noticed in the work that you do is you really bring a lot of three-dimensionality into it. So perhaps you can give artists some advice on what your philosophy is with this.
Well, there's you can train your eye to see details you would normally see. So when an artist who doesn't do a lot of art pulls a photo into a drawing program and traces out the person, those tend to look really stale and really like almost uncanny valley, and they look super flat. And it's because they haven't trained their eye to see the volume of what they're looking at. And so what my poses do is they force you to see the volume. That's what those lines around like the skull and things are. It's like, look, this is how I see the folds and I see how the pieces connect. And it trains you to start looking for how things connect on a human body.
You're providing artists with this amazing library of three-dimensional captures of the human form in various positions and angles that they can use as a foundation for any artwork that they would like, and they can use it commercially as long as they don't take your work as is and publish it itself somewhere else or in a book or anything like that. But any derivative works that artists produce with these images is 100% their own. Is that right?
Absolutely, without attribution. Like I don't need to be praised because I gave you, I don't know, I gave you a foundation to create your piece of art. Look, I'm a big believer that artists, well, I'm an industrial artist, like I'm not a fine artist. Now you can use these poses in fine art, and I've seen paintings done with them and they're gorgeous. Not my thing. But I'm a believer that if you're going to make money in art, you need to crank it out, and you are paid for your results, not for your method. And a lot of young artists think that if they don't draw it out of their brain, then it's not real art. It's like, that's beside. I've seen these fine artists do their thing. They cheat every single way they possibly can, because when it comes right down to it, nobody cares how they got there. They just want the painting or they want the drawing, and as long as it looks beautiful, as long as it looks acceptable, good, then it's good, period. There's, it's subjective, it's not objective. So now the problem with like I've had people say, oh, it's what you're doing is just a wireframe, you're just drawing a wireframe, and I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing, but I'm doing it in a way, like, as a human being, I'm interpreting it different than a computer interprets it. So you could do the same thing with Poser. Sure, you can turn it right on, the wireframe is right there, but when you look at it, it still looks flat. Like, there's no interpretation, the pieces bend wrong and nothing, there's no life to it. And what I fight to keep in the poses is life. And my vision of the pose, I feel, carries energy along with it, kinetic kind of motion and stuff. And that to me makes the whole difference between, just a wireframe, or, like you said, using the cool cross contours to go, oh, like, I sometimes will use little details, and I'll draw lines in where there's no line on the body to point out, look, this detail goes this way, like, like how the shoulder girdle comes into that, whatever,
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm assuming that your work as a tattoo artist has definitely helped inform your knowledge of anatomy. It must have, right?
They're self-reinforced. Both of them, I mean, it's symbiotic. Yeah, it's like one reinforces the other. Like, there are times now when I'm working where I'm like I'll be placing like a tattoo design on somebody's body, and I'll think back to a drawing I did and go, oh yeah, well, when they, like, if they're straightening out their foot or flexing their foot up, the like the muscle on the front of the shin does a certain thing. Like, I'll be and so I'll lay a tattoo on differently so it doesn't bulge out the wrong way or something. But the only reason I would think of that is because I'd drawn it 100 times.
Yeah.
So that definitely happens.
Yeah. Ah, that's so cool. So now you're about to publish your 5th volume, right? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
I did the first 4 volumes pretty quickly. Like, I knocked them out in about a year, and I was on a mad rush. It was a brand new thing. I had not burned out. I did a ton of poses. And then did a Kickstarter and did a 300-page book, and I split that up, and so I got like 2.5 books out of that, and then I realized I didn't have any couples poses, so I knocked out 100 couples poses real quick, and that was like 3 years ago. I think it was 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago now. Over the last couple of years, I had sort of made the decision that I'm going to. I make a pretty good living tattooing, but I sort of decided that I wanted to also spend more time creating more of the books. Like, I wanted this to be part of my life, ongoing, like, not just like I knocked it out in 1 year and I'm not going to do anymore. Like, what if I did 10 books? What if I did 20 books? And it started to make a lot of sense to me. And I really had spent a lot of time going, does this make me happy? And drawing, does drawing them make me happy? And it turns out it really does. Like, there's something about it that makes me feel like I'm making the world better. And so I, with a friend of mine encouraging me the whole way, I stepped up and collected all the poses, and I'm thrilled with the book. Like, I'm super happy with what we accomplished with it. I think this book is going to have something like 400 poses in it.
Wow.
And so I worked hard on that. But some of these, I'm thinking moving ahead, I'm going to do some stylized stuff and some genre stuff, and I'm going to have some fun with it now. I'm going to do some things that I want to do.
Nice.
And so the the photo reference and stuff will be important still, but it won't be how can I say this? It won't be the focus. It won't be the standard. It'll Most of the poses from this point forward are going to be right out of Justin's head. And
Nice.
so so the proportions are gonna be different, and the poses are gonna be way more dynamic and things like that. I mean, you've seen it. Most pose
Yeah.
photography is pretty static. People standing there doing this pose or that pose. And
Not always, not always a lot of foreshortening either. And
no.
and it makes me no. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I've gotten a lot of hell for not doing foreshortening or perspective work. And what I was trying to tell, and that was a choice I did intentionally, because there's so many if you couldn't draw it, how can I say this? If I can't draw it just looking at it, how am I going to draw it with some kind of wild perspective? And so the books I was doing, and most of the poses are head to foot, like they're full poses. It's not like from the waist up or something like that. And but foreshortening and perspective and really dynamic stuff, that's happening. Like that's all the new books are going to be, like I said, they're going to be wildly dynamic, I think.
So cool. So the next theme that I'm going to be posting for the Art Mannequin Challenge is going to be foreshortening. And so hopefully I can get you to submit some entries. Some of the interpretations that you've done of the Armature 9 figure reference that I've published on Facebook are some of my favorites. And so I'm curious, given that you already had such a well-established process, what was your interest in the mannequin itself, and what advantages does it provide that maybe the photo reference wouldn't?
Once I hammered in the human form into my brain a little bit, where I could draw it just on demand, but using the mannequin, using the armature, allowed me to get a really cool, really like energetic pose without having to go through a ton of photos. And the pose probably wasn't in any of those photos anyway. And then turn it exactly like I wanted to see it. So everything I wanted to show was showing. And then I always would take a photo of it, so it would hold still. And then I would use that as my reference for the actual drawing. And to me, it's on my cell phone. I'm not kidding, dude. I probably have 4,000 photos of armatures on my phone.
Wow.
I'm not kidding, because I'll sit at night. You know how some people sit at night and watch TV or whatever. I'll sit at night and turn on YouTube, and I'll grab one of the armatures, and I've got a couple of ones that I've customized. But like, I'll take my favorite armature, by the way, is I love the giant that you made me. That thing is amazing. But my favorite is the adolescent. It's sort of like, it's just a little shorter than the adult.
Okay, yeah. The teen, the teen tweener.
The teen, yeah. That is, for some reason, that scale, that proportion is so like
appealing.
Yeah. That I tend to use it for almost everything. So I'll sit there for like 4 hours, and I'll pose this thing a million different ways. Like I'll use the stand, or I'll use the metal plate, and I'll pose it a million different ways. And I'll take it'll drive my wife nuts. I'll take like 400 photos in a night, and then I'll draw maybe 3 of them. But I don't ever delete anything. Hey man, Dropbox gives me 3 terabytes of space now, so I'd never get rid of anything. But yeah, but they're all on my phone. Well, the cameras are so good on the phone, there's no reason not to use the phone. So,
well, that's another project that you could do, is you could publish books with pictures of the armature.
Oh my God. I've thought about it so many times. I have a blog called, I think it's called A9 Poses or something like that.
Okay.
Where I started posting all my pictures, and I got out of it. I mean, maybe I posted 100 of them before I was like, oh, this is too much work. But you're right. I should start posting those again.
Oh,
But yeah.
do you have the giant
by any chance? The giant with you?
Big
Yeah. No, we were talking about last night, so I grabbed it and it's right here.
Oh, there it is.
Are you on? Can you see it?
Yep. So cool.
So, dude, he is held up. So, first thing, this is the coolest bit, dude. The fact that you did that for me, you put the website name on there. That's coolest. So cool. That is the coolest thing of all time.
So
but
yeah, awesome.
Dude.
Yeah.
So this guy, and he is all here. Every digit on both the hands are still there, and
so awesome.
and his middle peanut is actually still intact, which is great. The only thing I can't find, it's probably in a box somewhere, but I'm missing a toe.
Oh, okay. I can send you one.
Missing a right toe. Dude, how cool is that? Like, yeah. He is the greatest mannequin of all time. Like, that is, look at that.
Yeah, that is so cool. Just right there, I feel like I could have taken 100 screenshots of you just turning it and getting some really cool reference.
Every time I look at this thing, I'm like, it took a genius to do this. Like, this is, I can't believe you aren't, I mean, this thing, it blows me away. I don't see them everywhere. Like, it really does. Like, I can't believe more people don't have their hands. Well, you know what? I mean, we definitely should talk about this, but Tumblr is great. So when Tumblr did their little purge back in December, and I was like, oh my God, how is the algorithm going to see my poses? You know, like, is it going to think my poses are adult in nature? Yeah. And initially it did. And so I was contacted by Tumblr a couple of times where they were like, it's still catching your stuff. Keep submitting them for manual review, and eventually we'll teach the algorithm what you're doing is okay. And so as of right now, of all of the poses I've ever posted, and there's probably like 1,000 of them, I don't have a single one that has been removed by the algorithm. I won every single review, which is amazing. And Tumblr is still by far my biggest platform. Although I don't know how many active people are there. I'd say of the 50,000 or so who are subscribed to my blog, I probably have 3,000 who are still active on the platform. So it's forced me to move along. I just go where the popular kids are hanging out. Like right now, Instagram is where I'm putting a lot of my effort, and I feel like Instagram is it's pretty fertile soil, and it's going to be I think fairly easy to wind up an influencer over there, and going to just keep chipping away at it.
Well, I feel like we're kind of starting to wrap this up. I was wondering if there was anything any last minute things you wanted to share, or about the volume that you're about to publish, or places that you want to direct people to. Like, what are the main platforms that you want people to be following your work through? I know you mentioned Tumblr, and now you're doing Instagram. Is there anywhere else you want people to go?
Well, I mean, it used to be so much easier when we all had websites. So I have a website. So if you ever want to know anything about my stuff, you go to posemuse.com. All of my socials are connected. Links to all the books are there. I am going to be posting blogs up there that I'll be sharing as posts everywhere else on Twitter and Instagram and blah blah blah. Cool. So Volume 5 is gonna hit the stores in July. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I got a grant from a cash grant. Somebody was like, hey, if you're doing something cool and you need money, write us a little thing and tell us, what you need. And so I wrote an email to this company and said, hey, I want to create a teacher's edition of the book that will be sold to teachers at cost plus shipping. And then I need a little bit of money to get a table at an Art Educators Alliance like a National Art Educators Alliance meeting and or convention and get the word out of the books, because I do have at least a handful of teachers who are using the books in the classroom.
Excellent.
And I'm getting some terrific feedback from them. One has wound up a really good friend of mine, and she's going to be spearheading all of this. So the money has been set aside, and
Nice.
we're going to basically give her all of the poses that we have, like 1,000 of them. She's going to cherry pick all of the poses she thinks will work best in a secondary or in a high school setting, in a book, for high school level students, honors level students. And she is going to curate the book, the teacher's edition book. And along with that, we're going to do a teacher's edition deck. I'm going to create an online gallery that teachers can go to and download all of the poses at high resolution so they don't have to scan the book. It's all going to be royalty-free use for teachers so they can make copies of the book and give them to the students. And then if there's any money left over, because we're not making, anyway, if there's any money left over, we're going to create a fund to give books to schools.
That's incredibly, everything that you've been doing, there's been so much generosity
in what you've done. What did you call it? Intense sharing or something like that? Extreme share, radical sharing. I really think what you've done is amazing, and I know from having talked with you previously how much the art community has really appreciated what you've done for them. And maybe sometime later on we can talk a little again about that stuff and some of the cool stories that you have to share in that regard. I just want to thank you so much for doing this, Justin, for having this interview and meeting with me. I really appreciate it, man. I wish you the best of success with all your current and future endeavors.
Thanks, man. Same here. I appreciate it. It's so great to be on here. Thank you for having me.
No problem, man. Take care.
Take care.